Okay, so today we're diving into something that I think is really fascinating, and a lot of people are curious about. It's quantum jumping.
Yeah.
And specifically, we're looking at it from the perspective of Ramat Bar M
Mm.
from Birkembang Bersama.
Yeah.
We've been going through excerpts from his YouTube masterclass transcript to get a feel for his unique take on it.
Yeah. It's interesting because it's literally just his personal presentation from his YouTube channel.
Right.
It's like full of anecdotes and client experiences
Yeah.
and like a mixture of science and spirituality.
Right.
So it's quite a unique perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. And our goal for you in this deep dive is to really understand the core of his approach to quantum jumping.
Yes.
And to see if it offers a new perspective for personal change. And of course, we want to keep it practical. We don't want to get too bogged down in the theory. But what can you actually take away from this?
Actionable insights.
That's it. Yeah. So one of the central ideas that stood out to me was this shift from thinking that something is wrong to taking different actions from where you are.
Okay.
And there's this really big focus on your present state and getting your energy aligned. So he starts out by saying that this version of quantum jumping
Okay.
is kind of like level 2
Yeah,
after the
okay.
law of attraction.
Yeah.
And he feels that the law of attraction often leaves people operating from a place of lack.
Oh, so this is an interesting
Yeah.
point. Because a lot of times when people think about change, they're like, I need to fix something.
Yeah.
Something's wrong with me.
Yeah.
But his approach is that there's actually nothing wrong with you.
Yeah.
So you don't need to fix anything.
Yeah.
It's just that that kind of energy actually attracts more of the conditions that you don't want.
Well, absolutely.
And he has this quote that's like, we do not get what we want, but we get what we radiate,
Oh, yeah. I love that.
which is very interesting.
Yeah.
Because it's like, okay, so it's not about like wanting something. It's like, what is the dominant energy
Yeah.
that you're actually like putting out there
Yeah.
in the universe or to other people?
Right.
And so
All about alignment.
alignment, yes.
Yeah.
And he gave a very interesting example in his talk.
Yeah.
He used to identify himself
Okay.
as a metal band kid.
Okay.
Like this is who I am.
Yeah.
I'm a metal band kid.
Like a firm definition.
Yeah, a strong definition.
Right.
And then at some point
Yeah.
he realized that he's actually not limited by that.
Yeah.
So from that realization,
Yeah.
he started to open up to new possibilities.
Right.
And then eventually got scholarships to go to Australia and South Korea.
Yeah, it's really interesting how when you shift that internal definition of yourself,
Yeah,
new opportunities can open up.
exactly. It's like
Yeah.
your internal story shapes the external reality.
Yeah.
You change the story, and then the outcomes change as well.
Yeah.
But it's not always like
Right.
straightforward like that.
Sure.
He shared this story about a client of his
Yeah.
who wanted to be happy.
Okay.
So she wanted to access a happy twin of herself in a parallel reality.
Right.
But somehow it didn't work.
Yeah. So what went wrong there?
The problem was that she wanted to change because she didn't like where she was currently at.
Right.
So it's like, I want to change because I don't like it here.
Right. She was trying to escape her
Yeah.
current reality.
And that actually,
Yeah.
according to this perspective,
Yeah.
sabotages you in a way.
Because that energy of I don't like this is just going to attract more of this.
Yeah.
You can't get away from it.
Yeah. So wanting to change because you don't like something
Yeah.
just reinforces the things that you don't want.
It makes it more solid somehow.
Yeah. Like trying to put out fire with gasoline.
Oh, I like that.
Right. So the energetic state is
Yeah.
very important.
It's foundational. Yeah. And then he gave another example
Okay.
from his own life
Uh-huh.
about a business that didn't succeed.
Okay.
And he went into that business because he wanted to change his life.
Oh.
He was unhappy with where he was at.
Okay.
And he also was looking for validation from others.
Oh, so he wanted to be recognized.
Yeah, I want to be good at business.
Okay, interesting.
And so because he was coming from that place of lack and that need for approval from others,
Yeah.
it ended up attracting negative business partners. And he
Yeah.
was taken advantage of.
So it's like
Yeah.
you attract what you
Radiate.
what you radiate.
Yeah.
So if you
Whatever that dominant energy is.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what you're going to get back.
And then he gave another example from a client
Okay.
who wanted to change jobs
Yeah.
because she didn't like her current job.
Yeah. Another attempt to escape.
Yes.
Okay.
So she went to another workplace,
Uh-huh.
but it turned out that it's actually the same.
Yeah, same environment, same
Yeah.
problems. Right, so just changing the external without changing that internal
Yes.
doesn't really work.
The blueprint is still there.
It's like taking your same emotional baggage to a new destination
Yeah.
and expecting a different trip.
Interesting analogy.
Yeah, and it's not just limited to those big life changes.
Okay.
He even talked about how people go on these like healing vacations.
Oh, yeah.
But if they're going into it from
Yeah.
a place of, I don't like my everyday life,
I need to escape.
yeah, I need to get away from this, they end up having very similar problems on their healing vacation.
It's interesting because our internal state
Yeah.
can actually color even those experiences
Yes.
that are meant to be
Rejuvenating.
relaxing and rejuvenating.
He gave this example of a client who went to Japan to heal.
Okay.
And the whole trip, from the flights to the tour guide to the other tourists,
Wow.
it was just like a series of problems.
Okay.
And it seemed like that energy of trying to escape just followed her.
Wow. So it's like true healing
Starts from within.
starts from within first.
Yeah.
So this is the core of what he calls the Birkenbang Bersama approach.
Okay.
It's not about seeing that your current situation is bad.
Yeah.
It's about understanding where you are and then choosing different actions to create a different life.
So you take ownership
Yes.
of your current situation and choose.
Instead of being in judgment of it.
Yes.
That's a really key difference.
Yeah.
It's a subtle shift, but it makes a big difference.
Uh-huh.
So that's one key takeaway.
Okay.
There's nothing wrong with where you are. It's just a starting point.
Yes.
And then the second key takeaway is that action is absolutely necessary.
Oh, okay.
You can't just do energy work
So
passively.
you can't just like visualize and.
You can't just visualize.
Yeah.
You can't just meditate and then expect everything to magically change.
Right.
He calls this the Disney effect.
The Disney effect.
Yeah,
Okay.
like expecting everything to just fall into place without any effort.
And he emphasizes that his role is not to give you the answers.
Wow.
He's
Yeah.
just a facilitator.
Right.
He presents possibilities,
Yeah.
but the decisions are up to you.
Oh, so you have to take responsibility.
You have to take responsibility for your own life.
Yeah.
And he makes this observation that a lot of people operate from this feeling of being special.
Special.
Like they deserve to be chosen
Oh.
without actually putting in the work.
Wow.
And then when life doesn't meet those expectations, they get disappointed and they start comparing themselves to others.
Right. So it's this
Yeah.
lack of
Groundedness.
groundedness. Yes.
And he also touches on this topic of competition and negativity,
Okay.
saying that they're not inherently wrong,
Right.
but it's important to be aware of the energy behind them
Yeah.
because you might not be aligned.
So be mindful.
Be
guys.
mindful of your thoughts and your feelings and the energy you're radiating.
Okay.
And it really all comes back to taking ownership, recognizing that you have a role in creating your reality
Okay.
through the choices you make and even the actions you don't take.
Okay.
And he talks about this future golden era
Golden era.
where desires will manifest effortlessly.
Right.
But that's not the reality right now for most people.
So this is like a
It's something to look forward to.
future possibility.
Yeah. And then he talks about this really interesting concept of lost potential.
Lost potential.
And how societal conditioning
Okay.
can lead to a fear of ease.
Fear of ease.
Yeah, and it's like this idea that we're taught that life is suffering before happiness.
Oh.
And so we actually develop a fear of things being easy
Interesting.
or a positive experience or what might seem like miracles.
Okay.
And he asks this really important question.
Yeah.
How often are you limiting your own potential
Wow.
for ease and joy
Yeah.
because of things you've been told or
Beliefs you've absorbed.
beliefs you've absorbed? Yeah.
Wow.
And so his aim is to remind you of your potential for these positive experiences.
Okay.
And it's not about being worthy in some external sense.
Right.
It's about being willing to choose it.
Okay. So it's like
Yeah.
instead of like
Deserving it.
deserving it
Yeah.
or earning it,
Yeah.
it's like realizing that it's already there
Yeah.
and just choose it.
That's a big difference.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he says that the universe is actually a supporter.
Cool.
It's our own limitations and beliefs that often create the difficulties.
We are often the ones putting up the obstacles.
We are our own worst enemies.
Yeah.
And then he shares this really personal story about feeling protected by something he calls collective soul.
Collective soul.
Yeah.
Okay.
During some difficult times he had in boarding school.
Right.
And he experienced this through his internal dialogue.
So this is like
Yeah.
a connection to some higher power.
Yeah, this feeling of being guided and protected.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And these weren't just one-off feelings. He gave examples of things that happened in his life that felt almost miraculous,
Okay.
like winning a camera,
Wow.
and then the scholarships to Australia and Korea.
So these experiences validated.
They really solidified that belief for him.
Yeah.
But then he talks about this period after he finished his master's degree
Okay.
where these miracles seemed to stop.
Oh.
And he attributes it to someone he really respected who had the belief that life should be hard.
Oh.
And that belief somehow rubbed off on him and made him doubt his own experiences.
Wow. So this is interesting because it's like other people's beliefs, especially those that we respect, can really shape
They can influence us.
our own reality without us realizing it.
Subconsciously, we take that on. Yeah. So for him, quantum jumping is really a reminder of that inherent potential.
Okay.
It's not about asking for something from an external source. It's about jumping to a version of yourself in another reality that already has greater wisdom and resourcefulness.
So it's accessing a higher version of yourself.
Yes.
Okay.
And this is where the concept of multiple realities comes in.
Oh, okay. So like parallel universes.
Parallel universes, the idea that every choice we make creates a branching timeline.
Okay.
And he gives a really interesting example from his own life about choosing to go to the library instead of hanging out with friends.
Okay.
And that led to him discovering this exchange program to Australia.
Wow.
And he realized that if he had made a different choice, he would have missed out on that whole experience.
So it's like
it's amazing.
Every decision
creates, like a splitting of reality.
Possibility.
Yeah. And so it's about using conscious awareness when you're making decisions to see how it feels aligned with a wiser version of yourself in another timeline.
Wow.
And he even shared this story about a client who trusted a gut feeling to move their car, and it prevented damage from a falling tree.
Wow.
And he sees this as the client tapping into the wisdom of a parallel self. Where the car was damaged.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
So it's like accessing...
It's like intuition.
Intuition, yes.
But intuition from a higher perspective.
Right.
And he very briefly mentioned this idea of soul contracts.
Soul contracts.
Yeah, this belief that we make agreements before we come into this life about certain experiences that we'll have.
So it's like a prearranged plan.
Yeah, it's a whole other topic.
Yeah.
But he just mentioned it in passing. And then he talked about being called weird.
Weird.
Yeah, and he brought up this definition of weird from Oxford as someone who can control their own destiny. Which is really cool.
It's a reframe.
It's a reframe, yeah. And it's like a challenge to embrace your uniqueness.
To be yourself.
Yeah. And he gave this example of Birkenbang Bursama manifesting a goal. The intention to go international led to a connection with an interpreter in Jambi. So it's like they set the intention, and then they took action.
And then the universe provided.
And the opportunity showed up, and then their offline events attracting attendees from all over the world. He sees that as another demonstration of how your intentions can create tangible results. So not just...
Your internal world shapes the external.
Yeah. So he kind of brings it back to these two key differentiating points
of
Birkenbang Bursama's approach to quantum jumping. One, there's nothing wrong with your current situation. And two, action is crucial. You can't just sit around and wait for things to happen.
So those are the two foundations.
Those are the two pillars.
And he also gave this suggestion to reframe.
Reframe negative events.
Negative events.
Yeah. So instead of asking, why is this happening to me? Ask, what is right about this situation that I haven't noticed?
That's a good one.
Yeah, and he gave that example about the car accident. That led to the discovery of faulty brakes.
Oh, wow.
So potentially preventing a worse accident later on.
Oh, wow. So it's like, even in a negative situation,
there's always something positive or a lesson to be learned. And he used the parable of the farmer and his son to illustrate how our labels of good luck and bad luck are really just subjective.
They're just labels.
And they can hinder our ability to quantum jump because we're so attached to these labels.
Yeah, and then we create a story around it.
Yeah, and it creates a rigid self-perception. And he cautions against these limiting self-labels like, I'm just a
dilly.
Yeah, and he contrasts this with the founder of Rumah Makan Sederhana, who clearly didn't let his background limit him.
Yeah, so it's possible to overcome these limitations.
Yeah. And his advice for neutralizing these labels is to question them. So instead of saying, I am this,
Yeah.
ask, am I just this, or am I also a spiritual being?
Oh, wow.
And he gave an example of his own experience with his book club,
Okay.
where he had a very limited definition of what it was.
Right.
And once he let go of that definition,
Yeah.
it was able to grow and expand.
Interesting.
And he even brought up this idea that's often associated with people like Deepak Chopra and Oprah Winfrey,
Okay.
that we are spiritual beings having a human experience.
Spiritual beings having a human experience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so the aim is to connect with your infinite being.
Your infinite being.
Yeah. To become an energy that attracts.
Oh, okay.
By moving beyond these restrictive definitions.
So it's not about like
Yeah.
limiting yourself.
It's about expanding.
Yeah.
Expanding your sense of self.
Right.
And he brought in the perspective of Dolores Cannon.
Dolores Cannon.
Yeah. Who said that life is about manipulating energy. And this becomes much easier when we release those rigid self-perceptions.
So when we become more flexible.
More flexible, more fluid.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then he talks about focusing on what you desire.
Okay.
Rather than what you fear.
Right.
And he addresses this belief that visualization is just fantasy.
Oh.
By pointing out that we're already doing negative visualization all the time.
Right. We're already imagining things.
We're already imagining the worst case scenarios.
Right.
And he brings up research from Harvard University.
Wow.
That 46.9% of active human time is focused on fearful futures and regretful past.
A lot.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
And this is what creates our suffering.
Right.
So the easiest way to be happy is to focus on the present moment.
Be present.
Be present, yeah. And he gives this really simple technique to help with that.
Okay.
Placing the tip of your tongue on the roof of your mouth.
Oh.
And he also mentions breath work.
Yeah.
As a powerful tool.
Right.
So quantum jumping, in his perspective, is about accessing your own wisdom in another reality.
Okay.
Not necessarily asking from outside yourself.
Right, so it's like an inner journey.
It is an inner journey.
Yeah.
And we actually had a listener question about parallel universes.
Oh?
Asking if our actions here directly impact those other parallel worlds.
Oh, that's a mind-boggling question.
It is.
Yeah.
So how would you respond to that?
Well, I would use the analogy of Doctor Strange in the multiverse.
Okay, yeah.
So it's like multiple possibilities exist.
Right.
And our choices are just ways to navigate those possibilities.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah, and from the perspective of like pure awareness,
yeah,
there is no failure or success.
Right.
It's just feedback.
It's information.
Yeah. And we get stuck because
we're attached.
We're attached to
the outcome.
A specific outcome.
Yeah.
So the aim of Birkembang Bersama is to help you reach this state of neutrality.
Okay.
Towards outcomes.
So like joy is normal.
Yes.
Difficulty is normal.
Yes.
You're not thrown off balance by the highs and lows.
Yeah, it's equanimity.
Equanimity, that's it.
Yeah.
And that listener followed up
with
this kind of frustration that it often feels like success requires external help.
Right.
While failure can persist even with effort if that support isn't there.
So they're feeling stuck.
They're feeling stuck.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a very understandable
human experience.
Human experience.
Yeah. And you said that if your current way of seeing things feels comfortable.
Yeah.
And it's working for you, then there's no need to change it.
You can keep it.
Yeah. But if it's causing frustration.
If it's not serving you.
Then there are other ways of looking at it.
There are other perspectives available.
And it's really about choosing your perspective.
Right.
And Rammat shared another story about wanting to study abroad.
Okay.
But not having the money.
Okay.
And initially he was frustrated with the universe. Like, why me?
Like, why am I in this situation?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But then he shifted to taking small practical steps, like going to the library.
Okay.
And that led to him discovering the scholarship.
Wow.
And it's like a combination of the intention.
Right.
And taking those small actions.
Yeah.
And even recognizing those small opportunities.
And the universe provides.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the listener was still feeling stuck.
Okay.
And they described this feeling of being shown glimpses of possibilities that then disappear.
Like false hope.
This feeling of false hope.
Yeah.
And so you introduce this concept of overimportance.
Overimportance.
From Transurfing by Vadim Zeland.
Okay.
Where when we give something too much importance. Or emotional energy.
Yeah.
It creates resistance.
Oh.
And so he used the example of the interpreter.
Okay.
That didn't materialize earlier because he was so attached to it.
Just holding on too tightly.
Holding on too tightly, yeah. And then it finally manifested when he was able to let go
And he detached.
of that need. And he gave another example from his own life.
Okay.
The Australian scholarship.
Yeah.
He was just going with friends casually.
Yeah.
Versus the American scholarship.
Yeah.
Where he was super serious.
Oh.
And driven by this desire to impress.
Right.
And the Australian one, he got. The American one, he didn't.
Interesting.
So it's like the more you try to force it,
the more you try
from that negative place,
yeah, solve the problem.
yeah, the worse it becomes.
Right.
And so the shift needs to be towards asking, what small, easy, and enjoyable step can I take?
Okay.
Instead of being overwhelmed by the whole problem.
So it's like breaking it down.
Breaking it down into manageable steps.
Okay.
And he gave the example of wanting to write a song.
Okay.
You don't have to write the whole song today.
Right.
You can just explore some free online tools.
Yeah.
For guidance.
Okay.
Take a small step.
Okay.
And he also cautions against getting too attached to the potential success of something, because that can create its own obstacles.
Okay.
It's about being present in the process.
Enjoying the journey.
Enjoying the journey, yeah.
Okay.
And another really powerful shift is changing your language from I have to I choose to.
I choose to.
Yeah. It's about reclaiming your agency.
It's empowering.
It is empowering. Yeah, and then the listener was sharing this feeling of being stuck.
Okay.
Despite personal growth.
Right.
Like they're in a game and they're leveling up.
Yeah.
But they keep facing the same challenges.
Same boss fight.
Same boss fight, yeah.
Right.
Different details.
Yep.
And so your advice was to ask, what do I like about this situation?
Okay.
And what is the contribution of this event?
Right, because often we're creating it.
We are creating the patterns.
We are creating the patterns, yeah. And you gave that example of the client who kept attracting abusive partners.
Right.
And the turning point was not just seeing it as negative.
Yeah.
But seeing the potential within it.
So it's like recognizing
that even in a negative situation,
there's a gift.
There's a gift.
And then once she recognized that gift within herself,
yeah,
she was able to redirect that energy.
Right.
And then she started attracting healthier relationships.
Wow.
And a really key point
okay.
is changing your state without judgment.
Without judgment.
Yeah. When the judgment decreases, creativity increases.
Creativity flows.
Yes. Yeah. And then another listener was asking about finding the balance.
Okay.
Between patience and taking immediate action.
Right.
Feeling overwhelmed by constant action.
Yeah.
But also anxious by inaction.
It's like
it's a tough spot.
Dilemma.
Yeah. And you brought up that quote from Jeff Bezos.
Okay.
Stress comes from thought without action. And then asking, what decision do you want to make?
So it's about making a choice.
It is about making a choice, yeah.
Yeah.
And the listener felt drawn to continue working on their projects.
Okay.
Which felt like a positive step. And you shared the advice to create for yourself.
For yourself,
yeah.
Not for external validation.
Not for others, yeah. And you shared your own experience with this deep dive.
Yeah.
That the initial motivation was just enjoyment.
Yeah.
And consistent exploration.
Yeah.
And the positive impact on others was just a bonus.
Yeah.
It wasn't the main goal.
Okay.
And the listener made this observation.
Right. Okay.
That when they share their work with a wider audience,